Regular viewers of this channel will know that this Collet Chuck has been stuck in my mill since I got it. Irregular viewers might know that too, but really you guys should just eat some more fiber. Now, I've tried just about everything to get that thing out, and it will not budge. You can go ahead and leave me a comment, let me know what I should have done, and I'll reply saying that I already tried it. But I'm at the point where I'm ready to resort to surgical removal of it. I need to make a bigger fly cutter for a project I'm working on, and hanging a big chunk of 4140 off of this thing probably isn't the best plan. I'd rather make one that mounts directly into the spindle, so it's time to destroy this Collet Chuck. But before I render the mill non-functional, I should probably make a drawbar, since I don't have one, because this Collet Chuck is just that stuck it didn't need one. I'm pretty certain this is a piece of a Model T Ford drive shaft. Anyway, it's going to be better used as drawbar for my mill than it would be rotting away on the riverbank. Perfect. I put this off for a lot longer, but now I'm really at the point where I need to get this done. Taking a shot at drilling this thing out while it's in the mill. I'm not real confident it's going to let go, but I feel like it's worth a shot. If I can knock some out of the middle, maybe it'll come loose. I'll give this a couple whacks, but I'm not expecting much. I've got a carbide parting tool in the vise, and we're just going to go in and see if we can't part the end of this off. That's okay, I got another one. That's certainly not the way I wanted to have to do this. Since I can get something into the drawbar threads from below now, there's a chance I can use this as a puller. Again, not expecting much. Well, I think we're moving over to the lathe. I want to set my compound for the taper in the spindle, which is a Brown and Sharpe 9. Probably the best example I have of a Brown and Sharpe 9 taper is the center for my dividing head. It's got a center hole in the end, so if I put a center in there I can hold it. But I need a center hole in something in the tailstock too. There are a couple of holes through the lead screw to let you access the screws that hold the nut onto the quill. You have to get them in exactly the right position, and I kind of forgot how this comes apart, so it kind of fought me. Once I got it apart, I remembered how you're supposed to take it apart. I know I said I've been putting this job off. To give you an idea of how long, I originally built this steady rest with this job in mind, and that was 2.5 years ago. Going to consult my copy of the Machinery's Handbook. It's the 1946 edition. Brown and Sharpe number 9 is 900 thousandths at the small end, and we're going to go 4 inches deep with that. Actually, the biggest taper shank drill I have is 27/32. It's 843. So that'll leave me around 30 thousandths either side. We'll work up to this. The material in the shank on this was pretty hard, kind of right on the limit of what I could drill, and made some horrible noises. Well, we had a problem. As I turn this by hand, you can see the quill in the tailstock is spinning. The key that goes in this slot was mostly sheared off already. In some of my videos you could see the tailstock quill twist a little bit, and I think it finally died. Been meaning to make a new one of these. I guess now's the time to do it. You can just barely see the little nub of where it was, and it's not there anymore. I think the old reverse idler shaft from my Jeep transmission, properly tempered, should be a pretty good material for this. Work holding is going to be a challenge for this little piece, so I think I'm going to use a sacrificial piece of aluminum. Checking this with gauge blocks. It seems like 189 is a pretty tight fit. I'll probably shoot for 188. It's 3/16 nominal. Normally I'd just knock this out on the mill quickly, but that's really not an option right now, so it's time to lube up the shaper. Since I centered the hole in the aluminum fixture, I can just flip it, take the same amount off both sides. If I took off what I think I did, I should be at 243. 246. Not bad. 188. Knocked a little nub off there. Did some deburring. That is very nice. Well, there's the final result. I'm going to put this back together off camera and we'll get back to drilling. I was honestly a little surprised in how much this reduced the overall play in the tailstock. It's a lot nicer now. While I won't say that this particular operation is uninteresting, it doesn't make for very compelling video because the visibility of it's not great. I've run this boring bar out farther than I should have already. In order to get this one in there, I need a little bit more space, so back to drilling. I got this cut down to about 5/1000ths thick before I was able to peel it out. I don't think this was coming out another way. I got out my inspection camera because it's really hard to see in there. And I think I've still got one piece in the middle and maybe a little bit down at the end. There's definitely a piece down at the end and maybe a piece in the middle still. Let's try doing a little bit of blue on this. Let's see if we can figure out where it's hitting. That is way more than I needed. Yep, right there. In hindsight, if I had to do this again, I would have left, I don't know, 3/8 of an inch or so at the end that I didn't drill through at all, so I could just whack it out from the top. So I did a few more rounds of that, and I've gotten to the point where with the collets, because they're recessed on the end, I can fit the collet in. There's still some little bits in there, and honestly I'm getting to the point where I'm kind of scared because I'm working blind in there. It'd be pretty easy for me to damage the taper of the spindle. So I did something uncharacteristically smart. I spent the money and waited the time and got the proper size Brown and Sharpe 9 reamer. So I'm going to go ahead and use this to get the remains of that shank out. Getting a little bit there, little by little. That's what we want. At this point, I'm really not sure if there's still something in there that needs to come out or not. The only thing that might be it is right there. While I've got the compound set for the right angle for a Brown and Sharpe 9 taper, I might as well make some tooling. I turned a little arbor here with a 1/2 inch thread. It's the same as the drawbar thread. And I've got some various bits of old CV axles and parts of Jeep transmission. I went ahead and drilled and tapped these for that same 1/2" thread. Now I can go ahead and thread these on here. It's not going to hold it perfectly concentric, but it'll be good enough for a drawbar thread. The travel on my compound isn't enough to turn the entire taper in one go, but by putting some Sharpie on there and feeding in real slow, you can actually get pretty good results. Since that previous setup wasn't really conducive for facing off, I put the quill back in the lathe. That way anything I turn on here will be concentric to the spindle. And I've just got a piece of all thread with a nut on it that I'm using as a drawbar. The very observant among you will notice the outside diameter of this is running out a little bit more than it should be. After taking it out, test fitting the taper, I decided to tweak the angle a little bit, put it back in the lathe and did that, but I figured I could clean up the OD in this setup instead. So the thing I forgot earlier is there's a little set screw in the bottom here. And with that backed off, this whole thing just kind of slides right in there. Or it should. I had this great idea that I was going to use my dividing head to finish machining this fly cutter, because it's the same taper. Problem is, if I have it tilted up like this, there's no room for a drawbar there. Now, because this is a self-locking taper, I should be able to just drop that in there, give it a couple taps, and it should stay in well enough. The issue with that is, I machined this a little bit smaller than it should be, so while it fits fine in the spindle and stays, the taper on the dividing head is ever so slightly longer, so that doesn't seat in there. So now I need to figure something else out. I basically knocked up a Brown and Sharpe collet block, and by knocked up I mean spent most of the day making. It might seem like a lot of work for a fixture that I'm only going to use once, but actually I'm probably going to use this in the future for making more tooling. So I left part of it round so I can stick it in the 4-jaw chuck and center it, and I wanted to get a good surface finish here so that I can also run an indicator along there and make sure it's in the chuck straight. I didn't leave quite enough room on the back to get like a socket-head cap screw in there, just because the taper ended up deeper than I thought it would. I might try to get a flathead later, but since this is a self-locking taper, it doesn't really even need it. I'm going to take back what I said about not needing a drawbar because I got to basically the last cut and the thing came loose. Well, I'm going to completely gloss over how terribly that went and just say that I got it done and I'm going to move on to putting some set screws in this. Well, if that seemed like an awful lot of work just to make a fly cutter, it's because it was. But while I was at it, I also made a drill chuck arbor, 1/2-inch end mill holder, arbor for a 22mm cutter. That one's an involute spline cutter. I also made this little Morse Taper 2 sleeve. This wasn't too hard to make since I have the reamers for it, and milled the keyway in it. And now I can use my Morse Taper 2 drills and reamers in my milling machine. Of course, we can't end the most convoluted fly cutter build on YouTube without testing the fly cutter. I've got to say, I'm really happy with the result, and having used the mill a bit without the Collet Chuck with other tools, I can tell the rigidity is really improved. I think I'm going to like it. I can also say I feel totally justified in putting this off for so long. That was tough.